Thank you. Welcome everybody to the Audit and Governance Committee, 17th of October 2024. And welcome all the members and other speakers. We're live webcasting today, so can I remind members to use their microphone and remember to turn the microphone off when not speaking. The agenda. So, firstly, are there any apologies?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. We've got apologies from Councillor Presswell, who is on the Teams link to dialing in remotely. And we also got apologies, whilst not committee members, from the leader and deputy leader. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, apologies from Councillor Brazil and deputy leader, yeah. Okay, just to say on the agenda that we may move some items around. I don't know if we want to just check that in advance, because we've got Steve Molyneux to talk about the risk register and the risk report. And I think, Steve, you've only got availability in the first part of the meeting. Is that right?
Yeah, I've got an external meeting with a supplier at 10:30, Chair. So I'm available for an hour.
Okay, so why don't we move your item then, item number 10, around strategic risk register and framework, after declarations of interest. Would that be okay?
That's great, thank you, Chair. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. We do also have a suggestion from Nathan Coughlin from Bishop Fleming to move part of the agenda around the finance area slightly. So I don't know if you want to do that, or what's your feeling on needing or the benefit of doing that?
I'm fairly flexible, actually. It's just ordinarily you'd normally present our findings on it ahead of the accounts, then coming as final then for you to approve. It's just the order between the accounts and actually our document.
Okay, Lisa, would you be okay with that?
Yes, very much so, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, so thanks. So we're basically swapping item 5 and 6, really. Is that right?
Yes.
Yep. Okay, thank you. All right, so let's do that. Unless there's anyone, any members that have got a concern, let's make those changes. Okay, thank you. So item 1, the minutes. So we've got 2 sets of minutes: audit and governance from the 25th of July and the code of conduct hearing panel from the 18th of July. So let's take them one at a time, I think, please, because we've got some amendments to the first line. So the audit and governance committee meeting on the 25th of July does have some proposed changes. Lisa, do you want to just talk through some of those for us, please? And then we'll come on to approving or commenting or getting feedback on the minutes generally. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, we've got some proposed additions to the first item on the 25th of July Audit Committee minutes. That's AG 0324. And just to add a couple of extra sentences in there. So obviously at that meeting we talked about the draft accounts. We just wanted to add in a sentence that said, the committee welcomed the additional investment income and savings made and expressed some concern over areas where additional expenditure had been incurred. And then to add the words, in response, it was stated that the additional expenditure and income was synonymous with the recent financial climate. Also to add in some words that says, the Section 151 officer stated that heads of service had been asked to identify efficiency savings for the next budget setting process. Also, Chairman, as part of the meeting, we did discuss about earmark reserves and removing the business rate Section 31 compensation grant reserve from a calculation. So I've proposed changes. If the business rate Section 31 compensation grant was excluded, total available reserves was 17.03 million for 23-24, when capital reserves were also included. This compared to 19.67 million in 22-23. And that was the calculation that was sent out to Audit Committee members following the meeting. last time. And also just to add a bullet point at the end that said the committee welcomed the summary accounts and how easily readable they were, and that the annual governance statement was also approved with amendments as discussed. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, I personally suggested we make those additions because they were discussed and I think they're important. Yeah, Councillor Rick.
Can we also, whilst we're on this section, AGO 324, add a T at the beginning of the fourth resolution so that it's
Yeah, this.
says
Thank you.
that
Yes,
rather
that
than
is.
at.
Yes, okay. Very well spotted. So, perfect. All right. Any other amendments or comments on the minutes? All right. Good. Okay. With that, then we can approve the minutes. I think, unless there any dissent on that. Okay. Thank you. Let's move on then to the Code of Conduct hearing panel on the 18th of July, 2024. And well, I was there, so it's probably up to me to move this. I'm not sure actually. Don't see where that's written, but anyway. Okay. Is there any feedback or any comments on the minutes of the Code of Conduct hearing? I think it's fairly self-explanatory what that's saying. Okay. Also passed. Thank you. All right. Perfect. Okay. So. Urgent business. There are no items of urgent business. Division of the agenda. I'm not aware that we need to divide the agenda. And declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest, members, particular to the topics being considered today? Okay, good. None known. All right. So let's move then to item 10. The strategic risk register and framework, so pages 253 onwards. So, Steve, maybe you could take us, well, let's look at the recommendation that the Audit and Governance Committee consider the updated strategic risk register in Appendix A. Steve, maybe I could ask you to introduce what we're seeing on the risk register and also talk a little bit about how the process works, because I think there's been some updates in that we might want to understand and think about. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And that's my understanding of why you wanted me to explain the process. So I wasn't particularly going to talk through the risk register. What I was going to do was explain the process. So each head of service responsible for their service area has a risk register. Any risks that are reviewed as high, so over a score of 12, are flagged to the performance board. The performance board is an officer panel of myself and Drew Powell as the Director of Government Governance and Assurance, who jointly chair that meeting. We have a couple of other attendees, Jim Davis and Neil Hawke. One of the standing items is to look at the strategic risk register on a monthly basis. We meet monthly and review risks on a monthly basis. Some of the other things that we look at are things like HR performance, so sickness levels, and HR present a dashboard to us bi-monthly in terms of the performance, in terms of sickness and so on. But in terms of the risk register, any risks that have been flagged by heads of service as being high come to the performance board and we review them and determine whether they should go forward onto the strategic risk register. The minutes of performance board are then reviewed by the senior leadership team as part of their governance process, and then obviously any new risk, the strategic risk register is then updated based on our recommendations. So the two issues in question that were questioned was there was a risk around the civic financial upgrade project, and at that time we have got a really robust project process in place. There is a project board that now meets weekly, of which I sit on and Mrs. Henstock sits on. The project team gives an update in terms of where they're up to with that project, and then that project manager reports and Mrs. Henstock reporting to the performance board in terms of how that project is going. So we felt that it was really heavily monitored and that actually there was no need to elevate it to a strategic risk. It's being managed as a project and therefore under project risk. So that was the first one. The second item was an item raised by the head of environmental health and licensing, and he'd raised a risk in relation to the impact of their current IT system impacting their resourcing and therefore their ability to deliver savings that have been committed to the senior leadership team. When we looked at that, there was two elements that we decided it didn't warrant going onto the strategic risk register. The first and probably most important is the service is meeting all its savings and commitments in terms that they'd made. So it's actually overachieved in terms of its savings. So the risk of would that those IT issues and the staffing resources required result in them not being able to deliver was not materialising in any way, shape or form. In fact, they'd overachieved their savings. So that was the first and most important issue. The second issue is we recognise some of the problems they've had with their service and their IT system, and we are in the process of rebaselining their project. It's almost become a project that never ends, and as a result of it, it's not exactly clear what is being delivered by the service, by the IT team. So we're in the process of, once the Civica Financial project goes live, that project manager will work to rebase that project and reset the objectives of that project so it becomes a definition of a project. It has a start, a middle and an end, whereas at the minute it's the end has never happened. So for those reasons, we decided that neither of those risks, which had been flagged as high, were actually high and therefore didn't need to go onto the strategic risk register. So I hope that gives you a sort of a flavour of the discussions we have at Performance Board in assessing those risks.
Yeah, Councillor Yardley.
Hi, thank you. Which head of department is responsible for climate change and biodiversity, please?
That is Mr. Powell, as the Director of Governance and Assurance, that he has a unique role in climate change and biodiversity. So the officers report into Mr. Powell directly.
So, follow-up question. Why isn't the climate change and biodiversity emergency that we declared, what was it considered and why is it not on the register, please?
My view on this is, and I believe it has been considered some time ago, and the decision was made because we have actually declared it, and again we have a clear, we have a separate climate change and biodiversity board, so there is a separate management board to manage the actions on there that also reports into the senior leadership team. So it's already, in terms of a officer decision, is already right up there in terms of priorities. So to give you an idea in terms of performance boards, we have the performance board, which is a generic looking at the organisation. We then have a specific board that looks at waste service, and we have a specific board that looks at climate change. We have one that looks at housing, and then we have a capital programmes board. Or is housing in the capital programmes, Lisa?
Housing is within capital programme. Yes, capital programme board met yesterday.
So in terms of key, how we are managing what you could consider as key risks, we have separate boards for housing in terms of housing crisis, a separate board for climate change and biodiversity, which then report back into the senior leadership team.
So my observation, we wish to reduce our scope 1 and 2 CO2 emissions to net zero by 2030. So I'm questioning whether we are actually succeeding in doing that. And therefore, I know we've got a board, but has the board taken into account that published statement? And I'm assuming that it's on track because it's not considered a strategic risk.
This is not my area of expertise, I'm afraid. What I would say is the executive gets a update at every meeting from the lead member for climate change and biodiversity. So in terms of, you've got in effect twin tracks of, you've got an update at every meeting to the executive, you've got a board that meets monthly, which reports into the senior leadership team. So all the actions that we've got against in the council plan against climate change and biodiversity are managed through those twin processes.
Yeah, maybe.
I realise that may not be the answer you're looking for, but it's the best I can offer,
Councillor
I'm afraid.
Yardley? What do you, perhaps I can ask with regard to risk and the strategic risk register, what's the implication of your questioning? Are you suggesting that we should be looking at that, it should be on the risk register, or we should be trying to find out what the risk score is or something like that? What's behind your question?
So you can tell by the direction of my questioning that is exactly the point. And so therefore, so we got there. But I wanted to give the opportunity to make sure that we got the information as best we could before getting to the point that, yes, that should be, in my view, should be on the risk register personally. And if it's not on the risk register, I would like to understand why. Thank you.
Okay, well, Mr. Molina, I don't know if you're able to answer that, but I mean, I think it's a fair question. Do you have a view, or do we need to get somebody else in the room to help us?
So I think, Chair, my preference would be, I mean, Mr. Powell normally attends these meetings anyway. I think if you minute the question, Mr. Powell at the next meeting can give a more complete answer.
Yeah,
if you're
thank you.
happy with that.
Yeah, I'm very happy with that. I mean, it has been raised before, and I think Neil did suggest at one earlier meeting that it was being considered to be on the strategic risk register. I don't know where that's gone, so I think it is a fair point to minute out. I mean, personally, I think, and I refer here to line 2.6, I think it's very good that we've got a formal process, that we as a committee now understand that if an item gets to a risk score of 12, then the performance board consider whether it's a strategic risk or not. Yeah, Steve.
Just for clarification, over 12.
Oh, that's not.
Or above.
Yeah, that's not what it says. It says 12 or above. You can correct the note if you want, but I think there are items of score of 12 on the strategic risk register. So the implication of this is it's 11 or above. Anyway, correct us later if that is incorrect. But what's good is that we've got a formal process for how these are being managed, which was a bit unclear or opaque, or maybe didn't exist before. Are there any other points around this from other members? Okay, well, I'll raise then the point that I've got, which is that if we've got a process of something scoring 12 that the performance board is considering, then I'm a bit unsure why, despite your answers, why those things are not on the strategic risk register, those two items. I can understand your explanation, but shouldn't we be getting a bit more information? Or has the performance board decided that the score of 12 was incorrect?
Well, in reality, it's after mitigation and consideration, then the score is effectively lower. So that's the point, that we should be amending the mitigation score because we've considered the risk and what the mitigation actions are in place. So if you take the civic and financial ones, the mitigation is that there is a clear project board that meets on a weekly basis. It's got full project management, and then that reports into the performance board in terms of how that project is going. So that should be in the mitigation that says this is why it's not a strategic risk, because actually we have actions in place that mean that it isn't an ongoing strategic risk.
Councillor Rick.
Thank you, Chair. Just to check, Mr. Molyneux, when you were talking about the Civica Financial project, you said you felt that it was all properly managed. You put that in the past tense. That's still in the. You still continue to feel
Indeed, Mrs. Hanstock and I were on a project board. Was it Monday? Yes, yesterday. Was it only yesterday? Right. Okay. Yesterday, where we literally received where the team were up to in terms of testing, in terms of which tests have been completed. So they're now in the phase where we have a full test plan. The team, the finance team, are in the process of doing that testing. We've got an update on what tests have been completed, what are still to be completed, what tests have failed, what tests have passed, and literally broken down by every area of the financial system. So we've got a clear view, and in terms of the failures that we've had and that have been passed to Civica, are they critical in terms of the nature? And none of them are critical. I think there was the most, I think it was 13 failures out of something like several hundred tests so far, with about 20% of tests still to be completed in the next couple of weeks. So in terms of the assurance that that process is happening and we are getting a regular update of how that process is going, yes, we are.
Yeah, Councillor Nick. Okay.
Yeah, well, whilst I understand and understand everybody's questions and have concern for them, I mean, I just like to bring to everybody's attention that obviously the internal audit has been done on risk management and it was substantial assurance. So that should give us some support and knowledge that things are going in the right direction.
Yeah. Councillor Dennis.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I just looking at the report, and on one page we've got the risk to financial medium-term financial strategy, and one of the reasons given for that is the overspend due to the waste and cleansing service, and I'm aware that some of that was to do with staffing over the summer, and then on the other page we're removing the delivery of curbside collection and insufficient staffing resources. So just wanted to make sure that I guess maybe it's not as much of a risk to warrant being on there, but it occurred to me that we were still having issues with staffing and resourcing. So why has that come off?
Yeah, thank you. Steve, would you like to come up? Thanks.
Yeah, I guess that in some ways that was a project risk, and this is the bit where I think if there probably needs to be more definition to do in terms around project risk and strategic risks, because the project, that specific risk was around the implementation of the curbside sort across the district, which, had there not been sufficient staffing, could have gone horribly wrong and impacted the reputation of the council. Now that was again being managed as a project, but I think that was deemed at the time that because of the reputational risk that should become on the strategic risk register. That project has been completed, the rollout has been completed, which is why it's been removed. But in terms of your point of, but we've had some staffing issues over the summer, in reality, the impact on the service, we didn't not collect all rounds carried on to go out. So from that perspective, that's how we've managed the ongoing service. But the project, I see that as a specific project risk in terms of resourcing for the curbside.
Yeah, Councillor Dennis, you're comfortable?
Sorry, just to clarify, yes, it was managed and really well, but obviously it had a budget impact, didn't it? So, okay.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing, and also to some extent feeling myself, is that we need to. I mean, it's good that we're getting clear structure and some criteria, but we perhaps as a committee need to both understand the process a bit more and understand in a bit more detail why some things are or are not there. Like as Councillor Yardy said, the climate change issue. And also, I'd like to raise a point that if something is raised to the performance board as with a score of 12, but the performance board think there's mitigation in place and it's lower than 12, it would be helpful for this committee to see that and to understand what's been put in place and what the score now is. Otherwise, I would say if there is a score of 12 or more, we should be seeing that on the strategic risk register. So I think overall, I'd like to make two suggestions or amendments, perhaps. One is that we have a bit more clarity around the process and documentation for this committee when things are considered by the performance board. And secondly, that we have a bit more time or drill down into areas that are on the edge, on the borderline, and topics that are on the strategic risk register, because I don't think we've really discussed them in any detail, have we? And I don't know if the committee thinks that we should be looking at these things that are on the strategic risk register in more detail, so that we can be assured in our own minds that the right actions are being taken to mitigate them fully. Do those two recommendations make sense? Would anyone like to comment on them or put an alternative on the table? I'm happy with that. Councillor Yardy.
I agree with what you just said. Thanks.
Yeah. Oh, on the screen, Councillor Presswell.
Thank you, Councillor Bonham. Yes, I completely agree. And Councillor Yardy's point was very poignant. And I think if we were able to view these things regularly, monthly, or just sent through to us, so we can get on, so we can review things before they get to 12 or above, just to keep an eye on the process and to keep an eye on things that are potentially going to be a problem. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a fair point. I mean, we've got to try to make sure that we don't do the work that's done elsewhere and being managed effectively by the performance board or other boards. But I think it's important to understand the process, to look at what's on the borderline, how that's being managed. If there's mitigation in place, that's excellent. We should perhaps just be aware of that, and then spend perhaps. I mean, the recommendation from officers is that we spend our time looking at strategic risk. Is that correct, Mr. Molyneux, Steve?
Yes, it is, and picking up on Councillor Preswell's comments, there is a danger. I mean, there are lots of risks that we manage on a day-to-day operational basis, and in effect, that's what you pay us as officers to do. And our job is to assess whether it's going to affect the reputation of the council or financial issue or operational of a council to such a degree that it is a strategic risk. So there is an element of we have to do the day-to-day job, and risks come and go on a daily, weekly basis, and there's a danger of going into too much detail. But I think the focus on the strategic risks, I think, is absolutely right, Chair.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And that kind of makes sense, so long as we see it in the context of the overall process. Okay, are there any other comments on this? Oh, hello, sorry.
Chairman, can I just add a couple of points on the Civica financials? Just to say, now that the audit has been complete, that this will be the sole focus of the finance team between now and the go live date, which is the 9th of December. So if we had been in a different position where the audit, for example, hadn't been complete and was and the finance team still needed to focus on that as a priority, then that might have escalated its score. We're not in that position. We're in a good position. The audit has been complete or virtually complete, and that will now be the sole focus. We've got on well with training and testing. We've spoken to other councils that have gone live, and we're very confident of doing that by the 9th of December, and we can give a verbal update at the next audit committee meeting in December, when hopefully we can give some good news.
Thank you very much, Lisa. I did notice that in the papers that the project was on track, which is encouraging, and thanks for all your work around that. Yeah, appreciate it. Oh, okay, Councillor Rake.
Just very quickly, Chair, and also to to sort of put a bit of context in, you mentioned a score of 11 or above earlier. Of course, the strategic risk register can't give us a score of 11 or one of 13 or one of 14 because it's a multiplication of the numbers from 1 to 5. So it would be wrong to think of it as a subtly sliding scale. It will leap around. You know, you'll go from 10 to 15 if you're 5 on one measure and between 2 and 3 on the other. So
it's always good to have a mathematician.
I'm no such thing, but I wouldn't want us to sort of have a false sense of the resolution of this as a tool.
Okay. Do we need to note that in the resolution at all or not?
I just ask members of the committee to bear it in mind.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's move on then. Thank you. So what I'm trying to do is just make some amendments to this if I can, and I'll try some wording and see if people like it. So I would add to request the Director of Strategy and Governance to attend the next meeting to clarify the process of raising a risk to the onto the strategic risk register. After the word meeting, to clarify the process of raising a risk to strategic risk register, and leave the rest the same, I think, and get out the reasons why they're declared. Should we ask for the status of Councillor Yardley? Should we ask for the status of the climate change and biodiversity, or are you comfortable with the words as they are here? What would you want? Are you comfortable with what's written, Councillor Yardley? You were the one that raised this point.
I'm happy with the wording as it is. I think it's quite comprehensive,
okay.
And therefore there will need to be the status will be automatically included. So I'm quite happy with that.
Okay, thanks. And then add at the bottom, ensure and to outline the position or outline the position of those items on the strategic risk register. In other words, to explain what's happening around the 4 or 5 items that were on the strategic risk register. Councillor Dennis.
Sorry, it's just a suggestion or a question whether this forum is the right place to go through that explanation. Bearing in mind we always have fully, packed agendas, and whether a working group might be better. Not sure.
Well, fair point. I mean, anyone else with any views on that? I mean, my personal view is that this is one of the main things this committee should be looking at. So. My personal view is that we should all understand what the process is around the risks and the detail of the issues that are being flagged to us, and we haven't done that in the past year and a bit at all, really. So if there's no time, or if it overruns, maybe we'll take it as a separate item with a task and finish. But I don't know if people are comfortable with finding the time. Yeah,
Chairman, it is something we could do, like a all-member briefing on. I'd probably suggest that rather than a working group.
Oh, that is a better suggestion than trying to take it then in the committee, because then other members might be able to listen to that. Would the committee feel comfortable with that? Seeing some nods. Yeah, okay, then let's do that. That's good. So, yeah, okay, thank you, Councillor Creswell. All right, so...
Can I just check, Chair? So we're not saying this comes to the next committee meeting and it's replaced with an all-member briefing, is that right? So, and request that we call an all-member briefing at which a Director of Strategy... Is that what we're saying now?
You want the climate change to be discussed here? But then, okay, so then we need to split this somehow. So request the committee to clarify the process of raising. So let's, if you wouldn't mind just working out how to record that, because we've mixed the things up now. Okay, good suggestion, Lisa. Thank you. So the briefing is going to discuss the process and. What about the issues? What about the issues that are on the strategic risk register itself? I don't see how a briefing can really cover that. Do you want that to be in the briefing? What do you recommend, Steve?
Yeah, well, I agree with Mrs. Buckle that I think the process and the outline of the issues on the strategic risk register can be done in an all-member briefing. The specifics around what Councillor Yardy's asked for around climate change and biodiversity should come back to this committee. So that's my understanding of this. If everybody's
then
happy with
I'm
that.
comfortable with that if members are. I think that's a good way of splitting it so that we don't overload the committee and we get clarity, and also we involve other people, other members who may be interested in all of this. Okay. All right, let's just give Daryl a moment to type all that in. So what we've got is request a member briefing to clarify the process of raising the issue on the strategic risk register and to outline the latest position of those risks that are on the risk register, and that the director attend this committee to explain the position of climate change and the biodiversity and why that's not on the strategic risk register. Okay, and in addition that we are considering the updated risk register in Appendix A. Are we comfortable with that? Those in favour of that? Yes?
That's carried as amended. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Yardy?
Yeah, sorry.
You, okay. Thank you for your support. All right, thank you very much, Steve, for coming in and
All right, thank you,
doing
Chair.
that. I know other officers couldn't make it, so thanks very much for stepping in, and thank you as well, members, for agreeing to the rearranged order. Okay, good. So item 6 then. We're jumping around a tiny bit, but let me introduce Nathan Coughlin and Mark Bartlett from Bishop Fleming to introduce and go through the audit completion report. So we're taking item 6, so this is from page 175. And we look forward to your report, which I think members have seen is already pretty positive. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think we're going to do a bit of a double act on this as we're both here. So just to reintroduce myself, so I met you all at when I presented the plan back in March. So I'm Nathan Coughlin. I'm the audit partner of Bishop Fleming, responsible for signing off your external audit. And as the Chair introduced, my colleague Mark Bartlett here is the audit director with Bishop Fleming, and he's been responsible for managing and overseeing and doing most of the legwork on the external audit this year. So he'll be taking you through some of the more detailed parts of the report. Just to set out, I'm broadly going to go through some of the points around the executive summary. As I said, we presented our plan back in March. This report here is the report back finalising how we've carried out our audit, addressing the risks and the work that we set out in the audit plan, and our conclusions on the work that we've completed. I think the key thing to say is where we are today is that actually we're anticipating providing you with a clean external audit opinion over the true and fair position of the financial statements, and confirming that they comply with the Code of Practice on Local Authority Accounting. So that's a positive, clean assurance. And in our report, you'll see that we say our work is largely complete in the draft there. So this has kind of been a moving target as we've since we produced our report. We've continued to work on tidying up the audit files. As we speak today, we have essentially two points really left on the outstanding list. One of those is our final manager and partner reviews through tidying up the last bits of the file. And the second point is actually we are waiting still for assurances from Grant Thornton, who are the Devon County Council pension scheme auditors. So we're unable to sign off on the external audit until those assurances have been received. They provide the assurances to us because they complete the audit of the county council pension scheme, and in your accounts you're recognising a share of those assets. So we need to be comfortable that those assets values as a part of the scheme are accurate and complete and valued appropriately. We're anticipating those assurances to be provided to us this month. So we're hoping that we're in a position to sign off on the accounts at essentially the end of this month. And the usual process of that is that it's very unusual for changes to come through from those assurances that need to feed through to your external, to your financial statements. If they do find small differences on their audits, it's by the time you take a percentage of the assets that are your share, they're normally anything that is pretty trivial to your financial statements. So we're not expecting any changes from the financial statements from those assurances, but we do need to make sure we wait to see that. They've not flagged anything to us as a big issue at the moment, but their work is still ongoing. So that's where we are in the process. I think just to set in the context of that, you'll see in the executive summary talks about the audit deadlines. So obviously last year your audit was signed off in March, sort of 12 months post year end. There's the activity in the sector, and you see in there that the Secretary of State has laid regulations now that sets out the new statutory deadlines for signing off financial statements, and it incorporates all the backstop arrangements to clear down those audits that are significantly behind the deadlines, and clearing those off with disclaimed opinions. So the deadline for getting this signed off is actually not until February 25. So we're well ahead of the target there of that, but we anticipate, as we say, signing off at the end of this month. Those regulations, we put more detail in the appendices around that in terms of that. I'm happy to take any questions on that and what that's going to look like in the future, but it shouldn't really affect us here because we're well ahead of the curve in that respect. It's about clearing the backlog for the other organisations who aren't as well advanced and organised as South Hams. So in terms of the other points I probably need to raise is that at this stage is as well as this audit findings report, we will issue a auditor's annual report, which will capture all of the work that we do as auditors across the year. And essentially the other big piece of work that we do alongside the external audit work is the value for money work. So that value for money work sits alongside the audit work and will be captured in this report. Will come to you in your next committee meeting. At this stage, we've completed the work on that, but we're just finalising the report with management on that. And you'll see in our executive summary over the areas of financial sustainability, governance, and improving economy efficiency and effectiveness that we have to report on. Our work's complete, and we've not identified any significant weaknesses in those areas. So that means we're able to sign off on the external audit at this stage, and that final report will come back to you at the next meeting. One thing I do want to highlight probably on top of that, then in section 3, I think it's really important to reflect on the effectiveness of the process as an audit committee. This is our first year. We might ask for things slightly different to the old auditors. It's a fresh pair of eyes over the process, but we've been really pleased with the level of engagement that we've received from the finance team, and I'd like to thank them for their input and their engagement throughout the process. They've been really keen to make sure they get things right, deliver things to us on a timely basis, and make the process as smooth as possible. As a first year audit, we have identified a few things that we think perhaps between us all, we know where we've asked things slightly differently than previous auditors that we think we can tidy up on. So we're going to have a debrief meeting at the end just to make things even more efficient next year. But I think to reflect on that, actually, we've given green traffic lights throughout there in terms of the efficiency and effectiveness of the process. And we're really pleased with the effort that the management team have put into making this as smooth as possible for us. So thank you. I think probably at that stage, I'll pass over to Mark because we're heading to sort of the meat of the rest of the report then.
Okay, thanks, Nathan. So starting from section 4, this picks up on the audit risks that we flagged in the audit plan that came to your March meeting. So this picks up those exact risks and then sets out the work that we've done in our conclusions. So the first of those is around management over other controls. So this is a risk that cannot be rebutted. So this applies to all audits, and happy to report that we've got no issues arising from that work at all. The next 2 risks just confirm the position that we set out in the audit plan, that we were rebutting the risk of fraud in revenue recognition and expenditure recognition, and our work has confirmed that we continue to be able to rebut those risks. Then moving to the couple of the other significant risks where we've carried out a significant amount of work. So the valuation of land and buildings. At the time of drafting the report, that work was still being finalised. Happy to report that that work has been concluded and we've got no issues coming out of that. We have noted that the fact that the council doesn't revalue all of its assets in the year can sometimes be a challenge in terms of demonstrating that assets that weren't revalued are materially correct at the year end. Our work has indicated that's not an issue in this year, but we will continue to talk to management about ways to ensure that doesn't become an issue going forward. The other valuation side was around investment properties, and as we confirmed in the report there, we've got not identified any material issues from the valuation of your 2 investment properties. And then the final significant risk was around the valuation of the pension fund net liability. So Nathan's already mentioned that we're still awaiting the assurance letter from Grant Thornton, but I can confirm that we've completed all of our other procedures around the pension fund assurance work and are happy they've got no issues to report there. There was an issue that was a new one for this year that we've referred through to in section 5. I'll try and explain this in as straightforward terms as possible. I mean, effectively, you may recall in the Grant Thornton report last year that your pension fund had gone into a surplus position, like a number of local government pension schemes had last year, which is quite an unusual thing for the sector. That the approach to dealing with that under IFRIC 14 was something that was really developing last year, and obviously there was an adjustment to your asset ceiling so that you didn't end up in a surplus position. The approach of actuaries to this issue continued to develop, and in the 23-24 reports, they identified an additional liability of £173,000 that related to the council's ongoing commitment to secondary contributions. And something that we looked at as a firm across all of our clients was whether, because that methodology had moved on, whether there was an issue that the actuary hadn't identified around secondary contributions in the previous financial year. The actuary has came back to us as part of the audit and have confirmed that there was an additional liability, but it was only £155,000. That's clearly not a material sum to the audit, so that there's no requirement, therefore, for a restatement of the prior year financial statements. Hopefully that's explained that issue, but happy to come back to that if anyone has any questions when I finish going through the report. Section 6 is just really included information. So we mentioned as part of our journals work that we use a data analytics tool. This is just bringing for your information a couple of highlights from that in terms of how we look at the data around your journals. So the first table there looks at the journals per month and by transaction dates, and also has the values. So that's where we look at to see if there's any outliers. Are the movements across the year, are they consistent with our expectations? And we're happy that there's no issues coming out of that. The second table there is Benford's Law, which I must admit was new to me. I hadn't come across that one until fairly recently, but this is a statistical algorithm that looks at, across a set of data, how you would generally expect the numbers in the figures to look. And any outliers, then we have a look at. So the red line represents the normal pattern you would see across those figures. Clearly, we've got a couple that sit above that, so 4 and 5 in particular. And so that means that's transactions beginning with the digit 4 or the digit 5. And what we identified by digging into that is that there was a large number of transactions going through relating to garden waste charges, so either 40 or 50 odd pounds going through the ledger, and that's what led to that. So it's quite an interesting tool just to pick out if there's any statistical anomalies going on, and is there a valid explanation for those. Okay, moving on to section 7 of the report. So the good news is there's no audit adjustments and no changes to the primary statements identified from the audit. So that's very much a big tick there. We've just got 2 disclosure amendments that were made. So as you can see, they've got the ticks there. So both of those have been adjusted in the updated financial statements that you've got on the agenda today. And we've got 1 unadjusted item. And for those of you on the committee back in March, you'd have seen that there was a similar unadjusted item in relation to the CCLA investments in Grant Thornton's report, and we're of the similar view as your predecessor auditors in terms of how these are being classified, and that's something that we've discussed with finance, and they're going to consider this going forward, because obviously that's an issue that keeps coming up each year. But it's not a material impact, and that's why we're happy that it's not been amended within the financial statements. Then Section 8 of the VAR report picks up on our management letter report, so that's our recommendations. So we have 2 current year recommendations that have come out of our audit this year. One around where one employee contract that we tested had not been signed, so we've got a management response that we're happy with to take that forward. And also we've identified there were some leases not being disclosed, that where the total income from the lease was below £250,000. Again, we've got a management response in there that we're satisfied with. Over the page, we're picking up on the recommendations that were made in prior year audits. So we've got 3 on the following page that are ones that are unresolved, so are continuing issues. The first of those is around general system. It picks up on general system controls. So there were 2 aspects to this one. One of them was around the mitigating control for journal approvals. We're happy that that is an appropriate mitigating control. The other aspect is around segregation of duties around the administrator role on the finance system, and that's something that we've got management response that is being actively discussed at the moment to find a solution to that. The other 2 recommendations on there, the input data for valuations and payroll reports, both of those relate to requests made by the predecessor auditor. Due to the nature of the procedures we carried out in this year's audit, they were not items that we requested from management, so we'll be picking up on those issues in next year's audit. The final page of the management letter points are all issues from the prior year that have all now been successfully resolved, one of which was a subject of discussion a bit earlier on in terms of the Civica software. So we're happy that appropriate action is being taken by the finance team to get that implemented, and as we've noted, it's on track for the 9th of December. Finally, Section 9 picks up on some of the other matters that we're required to report on. Happy to say we've got no issues to bring to your attention either in terms of the other information within the financial statements or the annual governance statement, anything that we're required to report by exception. No issues to report. Happy that there's no issues around going concern, and as Nathan mentioned, the value for money will be subject to a separate report. We've noted here our work's complete and there's no significant weaknesses, so there's nothing that stops us issuing the audit opinion on the accounts. The final point on there just sets out the audit fees for the year, so that's setting out the scale fee as set by PSAA, and then the proposed fee variation in relation to the additional procedures in relation to ISA 315. That is something that wasn't included in the scale fee because it was a new standard in the previous financial year. That is something that wouldn't be showing as a fee variation going forward, because that will be reflected in the 24-25 scale fees, which are out to consultation currently. And then point 10, then Nathan mentioned that we've got included an update there on the audit backlog. As you say, that's not something we anticipate impacting on South Hams District Council. And finally, the appendices. We've got 2 appendices. One appendix on there, and that's the letter of those 2. Letter of representation, which we've got separately in the agenda. So we've got the draft wording within there, and the second appendix just sets out the requirements under ISA 260 for our communications with yourselves as those charged with governance and how that's been satisfied. So it's a quick race through our report, members, but happy to take any questions that anyone has on the detail or any other comments.
Well, thanks very much, gentlemen. Yeah, I'll come to questions in a moment. Beforehand, I just want to say thank you for doing the work in time and effectively, and congratulations to the finance team for both having all the material ready in good shape and getting very good feedback and doing it in time and getting a clean audit. So I think very, very well done to all those involved, and thank you for all your efforts, and hopefully in future might be a little bit more straightforward and easier. So let's hope we've done the hard work, and it's very, very good to hear such a clean audit report and positive feedback from external auditors the first time looking at this. So that's very good. Okay, yeah, Councillor Rick.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of questions, if I may. The first one's just a sort of process one, and also, sorry, I'd like to echo your thanks and congratulations to both the auditors and our finance team. I think it's great that we have caught up with ourselves rather compared. Your cover letter says that this report's private and confidential. But it's on our website. Presumably, it goes public at some point. When does that happen? And have we done a bad thing by making it public already?
No, I think you've raised a valid point in our templates there, so that's fine. So, as I say, it's our first year producing these, and you're right. So we should. For some of our clients, they will be under local audit, the police, for example. But yeah.
Thank you. And then the second, I think there's a third question somewhere, but I've forgotten it. But my second question is on the ongoing disagreement between yourselves and our team about whether to treat the CCLA assets as other comprehensive income or through profit and loss, if I've understood that particular squabble correctly. Is this a forever war? Can we sort this out? It would just be really nice to I'm thinking from the point of view of members of the public who might happen across this because it is public, thinking, oh, what's all that about? And if we could just, it is a technical disagreement, if we could just get rid of it, it would seem very helpful.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe we'll ask Mrs. Buckle to see if she wants to answer that. Thank you, Councillor Rick.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I mean, we are still very clearly of the view that these investments are not redeemable on demand. During the pandemic, we actually received a letter from CCLA saying just that all dealing was closed for at least 6 months, and therefore if the council had wanted to liquidate its investments, it couldn't have. However, I do grant Thornton we're clearly of the view that it had to be treated this way. Bishop Fleming have put it up to their technical team. The response has come back that they also agree with that view. So I think we will consider our position. We may look to change it next year, but if that statutory override is not in place in future years, and we've got no guarantee that it is, we have to bear in mind it would have an impact on the council's income and expenditure account. So at the moment, those investments are valued at 3.2 million. The amount of money we put in was 3.5 million. So that 300,000 drop in valuation would become a hit on the council's bottom line. So equally, it would work the other way. If the value of those investments rose, you would get that sort of additional income would be recognised through your income and expenditure account. So at the moment, it doesn't have an impact on the council's bottom line because the statutory override is in place by government. But that's the risk. If we change our accounting treatment in the future, if there is no statutory override coming from government, we would, whatever those rises or diminutions in value, we would be susceptible to that in our income and expenditure account. So I think Bishop Fleming are going to also see how their other clients treat this, whether we are the only ones sort of treating it this way. We will obviously we'll speak to our Devon colleagues and see what the national position is. But yes, we also don't want it on the audit report year after year. So I think we'll have a think about it and probably come back in March before we close next year's accounts with a recommendation to members about whether we change our accounting treatment. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mrs. Buckle. Yeah. Any other points on this? Okay, so perhaps just on this point, I think it would be helpful for the committee to understand what the proposal is going forward before a decision is made. I noticed the override's only in place till 2025, and maybe it's not so bad to have a comment on the accounts with regard to this when you compare it to a £300,000 loss on our main account. I don't know. That's something for us all to think about. Councillor Yardy, I think. Oh, well, yes. Well, whatever point. Proceed.
I don't know if this is the right place to ask a question about. We've got some things that are going to change in the next year, and therefore I've got something that I'd like to point out for next year. Is this the right point to bring it up or not?
I don't see why not. Absolutely.
Okay, so second homes. We're going to be bringing in new legislation that means that we can recover that revenue. And I do understand that the officers have already started sending out second letters to the obvious locations that need to consider that. But as the officer for recovery mentioned, it's dependent upon those homes, those residences, letting the council know that they're a second home. I'm stating that I don't think that's good enough, that I think there should be further measures, for instance, some sort of process or investigation that allows our auditors, internal, external, to understand the scope of the challenge, the scope of the problem. I put in fact that there are, in certain areas in my wards, we have more properties with voters than council tax. And in other areas, we have more properties with council tax but no voters. Now, when you begin to analyse, and the third factoid is that we've got more businesses, a significant number of businesses that don't pay business rates, but are declared businesses. Now, if we were to analyse those from around just the ward that I work in, and then multiply that across South Hams, I'm sure we'd find something that would be approaching an element of materiality. So my point being made is that I would really request that going forward there is a specific point to address second homes, the legislation that's coming in, and to make sure that we do use as best possible the electoral register to be able to identify potential locations which are optimising tax is what I would call it at this stage, but it might become something that is not optimising tax or considered not optimising tax in the future. So that's my point about second homes. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Yard. I think it is an interesting question. It's a new topic or a new issue that's going to come up in this next financial year, and it will be interesting to know what the auditors will do if it's something you'll take into account. I don't know if you want to comment or come back to us at another point.
I think at this stage it's just really useful to have that kind of input to think about ahead of our risk assessment for next year. So I know we're not quite signed off this year yet, but it's all this kind of thing we're feeding into things like sector changes in your results. Those kind of filter into our risk assessment process. So to be discussing with management about actually what controls and processes you've got in place over assuring that you're making sure that you are getting completeness of your revenue. So we'll start having those discussions with management, I guess, over the winter. But it's also about what other assurances, I guess, as an audit committee you feel you need to get around perhaps using internal audit, etc., to get to that position as well.
Thank you. I'd be very happy to give you some examples of what I would call non-validated analysis, but there may be something in it. So, thank you.
Yeah, I don't know, Mrs. Butler, if you want to comment as well on that.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So this currently is a project within our revenues and benefits team, and we are writing out to all second homeowners with this regard, because the premium would be effective from 1st of April 2025. So it won't affect the 24-25 accounts, but it would affect potentially 25-26. We're also working with other Devon districts, particularly East Devon, who also have a high level of second homes, because obviously we're administering the same legislation about how we ensure the completeness of data, but also make sure that there is no fraud within the system. And we're also working with the valuation office as well. So Councillor Yardy mentioned businesses that are self-catering properties. So this is where if a property is available to let for over 140 days or more, and it's actually been let for 70 days, which equates to about 10 weeks or more, they have to provide evidence to the valuation office that those properties have been let on a commercial basis. So it's not, it wouldn't be allowable for example, that property just to be let to family and friends. It has to be on a commercial basis. They have to give evidence of that to the valuation office. And I've got an email here from the valuation office. It's just 2 days ago, 15th of October, that says we've been conducting a programme to ensure properties listed as self-catering in the business rates list comply with the new self-catering eligibility rules. So they have written to all property owners via a questionnaire, and those responses have helped determine whether they feel that that property is still valid as a self-catering property and to be in the non-domestic rating list. They go on to say, if there is no evidence that this property meets this new criteria, we will move the property to the council tax list, and then this will be from the effective date of 1st of April 23. So they've written to all of the self-catering businesses in the area. If they cannot provide that evidence to the valuation office, they will find that they will go back into the council tax rating list on the 1st of April 23. So that's an exercise which has been done by the valuation office, and I think that probably addresses one of Councillor Yardy's points. We've been in dialogue with the valuation office around this as well, because we have about 1,900 self-catering properties within the district, and we have about 4,000 second homes. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, thanks very much, Lisa. That is helpful. Councillor Yardy?
Thank you very much. That sounds really, really good. My only additional comment would be the analysis associated with the electoral register, which might not be 100% sure, but surely might give some indication of where there may be opportunities to for second homeowners to be asked to step forward. As the officer said, unfortunately, we are reliant on owners advising that their property is a second home. So it's great if the analysis could potentially be extended to an analysis with the electoral register. Thank you.
If I may, Chairman, I think this is an area that will also get picked up through the National Fraud Initiative. So we have to upload data on an annual basis. Part of that data is data from the electoral registration database. We also upload information around single I'm trying to remember single occupancy. Thank you. The single occupancy discount. We have to upload that information as well. So there will be information that will be nationally compared through the National Fraud Initiative, and that's something that we work with Devon Assurance Partnership on as well. So I'm sure as they do look at the single persons discount, I'm sure they will also address second homes premium as part of their review as well.
Okay, thank you very much. That's a very valid point for future audits, I think, and useful to debate. Okay, are there any more points on then the or questions on the audit report that we just heard? And are we comfortable with the adjustments and notes made? Anyone with any questions? Oh yes, Councillor Yardley.
Sorry, apologies. Valuations. I understand that 50% of valuations are done in 1 year, so I assume the other 50% are done in the following year. So that means that we've got a 2-year cycle on Red Book valuations. Is that correct?
It's actually property value. You're talking about commercial properties. Yeah.
So the 50% is in relation to not the investment properties, the other assets of the council, and it was 50% by value. So the council has a rolling programme over 5 years of revaluing all of its assets. It just happened that in 23-24, by value, that was 50% of the value that was revalued in the year. But it's a rolling programme across 5 years.
Which then begs me another question, because I've had some experience or interactions with Red Book valuations, and significantly noted that there have been downgrades in those valuations within just about 2 years. And your answer says that you're looking at the Red Book valuations over 5 years. So from my limited analysis of that statement, there's a possibility that there could be a 5-year-old Red Book valuation, which would be significantly, potentially higher than that is currently or should be assigned to that asset. And that to me would be, given it's a risk already, is a concern.
What we've done is we've reviewed the valuations that have been, so we've tested on a sample basis valuations that have been made in the 23-24 financial year. We've then carried out, by the use of some indices, an analysis of the assets not revalued in the year to see if that gave an indication that the value that they were being held at in the balance sheet was materially different from an uplifted value by applying indices, and we were satisfied there was not a material difference. So we're not reviewing then the assets that were revalued in prior years. So it's the council's decision and to set a policy by which how often they revalue their assets. So there are some bodies that revalue all their assets each year, which is clearly a huge undertaking and an expensive one. The SIPFA code allows for a rolling basis of up to 5 years for the revaluation of assets in local government.
So to put it sort of simply, because you've used a pro rata check, you're comfortable with the conclusion of the revaluation that the officers have made, essentially, and it complies with the code.
Yeah, absolutely, but it's a valid point in that because a high proportion have been valued this year, leaving a smaller proportion that it's subject to an older valuation. There's quite a high proportion actually has been valued in the last couple of years here, so which is disclosed in the accounts. I was trying to find the note, but absolutely, it's a risk and it's a balance about cost to you of actually getting the valuation done and making sure you're comfortable it's materially correct in the financial statements.
Yeah, Mrs. Buckle.
Thank you, Chairman. If I could also add, we do on an annual basis do what's called an impairment review as well. So the valuers will look at all of the assets, so particularly the ones that haven't been valued in the year, and and give assurance to the auditors that there haven't been any material changes in valuation. I think one of the points that the auditors picked up this year was around looking to see whether any of the assets that hadn't been revalued this year have gone up in value. And that's one of the points I think on Bishop Fleming's audit letter is something we'll discuss with them for next year. For example, whether we just use some standard indices. So for example, leisure centres, I think nationally have gone up in valuation this year. We could have used like a national indices to apply that to our leisure centres valuations. We didn't do that, but that's an example. We could look to do that in future years, and that's something we'll discuss with Bishop Fleming about our approach to fixed asset valuation for next year for the 24-25 accounts.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor.
Thank you very much. I'm particularly interested in flood zones. We have a lot of coastal areas, and I do understand that there are decisions made within planning law that impact flood zones, which then mean that building uses, should they be divested or somebody applies for a change, does impact their value. So in terms of flood zones and recent decisions, which I'm going to refer to the Gasworks decision that was recently taken that impacts our area, there may be that is something to think about. I do appreciate that some values will have gone up, but there will be some that have gone down. Thank you.
Yeah, does anyone want to comment on that? You need an answer. Okay, well, it's just a point to note then. I think what we're hearing is that this year the valuation was done in a way that satisfies the auditors, but maybe there's ways to improve it without too much more effort in future years, which I think, given the importance of it, is worth noting that the team will look at different ways potentially to improve in the future. Okay, any other comments then on the audit feedback? Oh yes,
Chairman, sorry. I have just seen an email that that apologies I've only just seen, but it's from our independent member, Lindsay Lindley. Unfortunately, could I record Lindsay's apologies in the minutes? Unfortunately, she hasn't been very well this morning, but she has just there's a couple of things she'd like me to make the point on this item. She's just put, it's good to see the management letter points and internal control system letter with accompanying management comments. She's also put, in particular, the upgrade to the Civica financials live date of 9th of December. She's asked, could a verbal update be given at the 12th of December meeting? So obviously that's something we could do. She's also made the point, the other crucial letter is the letter of representation. Much of the wording is standard audit procedure, but the last two sentences stand out and is due to the overall health and strength of the financial accounting and internal control systems in place that members can feel assured. So that was just her points on agenda item 6. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, thank you very, very much, Lisa. I had also noted that we need to take her apologies, Darryl. So thank you. We did miss that at the beginning. So her points should be noted where relevant in the notes of the meeting. Thanks very much, Lisa. Okay, then let's move then to the recommendation, which is on the screen, that the contents of the external audit completion report are noted. All those in favour of that? Yep,
That's unanimous. Thank you, Chair.
thank you very much. And then could I just make sure that we minute the point about the that have been raised about the Civica financials and the consideration in March about the handling of the CCLA override? I think you've got those, Darryl, haven't you?
Yeah, I think we'll refer to those in the work programme as well, later in the agenda.
Okay, thank you. That would be perfect. All right, good. So we now go to the item 5, the annual statement of accounts and annual governance statement. I think what I'd like to do, if the committee is okay, is to just take these separately, if we can, just to make things a little bit simpler. Let's see if there are any questions or comments on the accounts. I mean, obviously, we've debated quite a lot of the detail of this with the auditor's report. And essentially, we've seen these accounts in the previous meeting. So I'm sure you'll remember most of the detail of the 152 pages from the last time we went through it. But if there are any points that came to your attention on reading it again, do have the chance to raise them now. Any members with comments or questions? Good, Councillor Rick.
I'm glad it's good. The more I've thought about it, I mean, it's incredibly welcome that that we had the surplus over budget on investment income, but I am concerned that this is the crack cocaine of financial governance, and it's wonderful when you have it and terrible when you don't. I'm not saying that crack cocaine is wonderful, sorry, but
I think there's a certain amount
of
personal. There's a certain amount of personal experience.
There is no
personal make sure
whatsoever.
he's not minuted, Darryl.
But you take my point, and I it's great that it was there, but I think going forward with the macroeconomic conditions changing, it is something that we need to watch very, very carefully.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I take the point, and we shouldn't be flippant with illegal actions, but maybe that's something that not saying that, let me be clear in my point, the cocaine point being illegal, the income from investments clearly not, but I mean, maybe the finance team want to comment on the latter, because I think there are some questions arising from that.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So yeah, with regards to our treasury management income, so on page 35, as Councillor Rake said, in 23-24, we did achieve 1.1 income over the budget. What we're looking to do, the executive have considered the medium-term financial strategy for 25-26 and the next 3 years after that. And we will need to bring our treasury management income target down. So for this financial year, it's 1.6 million. I'm proposing that we reduce that down to 1 million for 25-26. That is very much dependent on base rates. So members will have seen that inflation has fallen to 1.7%, so it's just below the government's target of 2%. Obviously, we're waiting to see what impact that will have on base rates. But currently we use Link Services as our treasury management advisors. They are predicting that by next summer, base rates will be down around 3.5% and will remain more or less at that level. Because of our treasury management strategy, very much the income that we receive from treasury management does track the base rate. So we invest in fixed term deposits with banks and building societies within the UK. We also invest in money market funds, and we also invest with the debt management office, which is really HM Treasury. And the reason that's our investment strategy is the strategy that the council has set is very much around security, liquidity and yield. So security being the primary objective, that if we invest £1 million, we need to absolutely ensure that we get that £1 million back. That being our primary objective, liquidity second. And this is something that we saw during the pandemic, that it was very important to us to have liquidity and to have cash flow, and to make sure that we weren't getting into cash flow difficulties. For example, during the pandemic, we didn't know if we were going to be able to collect council tax and business rates to the level that we had prior to that. So cash flow was very key to us, and yield being the third criteria. Now we do benchmark ourselves against comparative groups. So other councils, mainly within the Southwest, we're a part of a benchmarking club, and we in the past we are always near top quartile or at least second quartile in terms of the yield that we are achieving on that. We don't tend to invest in corporate bonds, and the reasons for that is that is very much weaker credit quality. There can be default risks there, although you can attract stronger returns. But as I say, our strategy as a council is very much security first, liquidity second, yield third. But our yield rates are good. So within the financial planning for next year, we do have to plan that we're going to have to reduce our income targets. Having said that, we are looking to maximise our returns. So at any one point, we're looking to invest in some longer term deals. Lloyds have been offering some quite competitive rates that we're looking to take advantage of. And we're also looking to open a green deposit notice account as well that tracks base rate with very good returns. So we do get advised by our treasury management advisors about some attractive returns, and as soon as we're notified of them, we try to act quickly, because those can be there one day and gone the next. So you have to sort of deal quite quickly to get some of those attractive returns. So that's probably quite a long answer, Chairman, but just to say we will look to change our budgets for the economic climate, and we'll look to see what happens. Obviously, we've got the Chancellor's budget announcement on the 30th of October, and we will be tracking base rates and where we think they're going. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mrs. Barkle. I think that's a very good, comprehensive answer. Councillor Rake, back to you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very reassured to hear that we'll be sort of weaning back our target for investment income. I think that's a very sensible way forward. I would also note, despite the somewhat over florid metaphor I used earlier, that this is part of a play of automatic stabilizers, and when interest rates are high, it's generally because inflation is high, and therefore the negative shocks that are shown in the analysis of variations on page 35 should be lower as interest rates come down. So that is also provides some reassurance. But I'd nevertheless think that this is an ongoing area. It's a substantial part of the overall picture, and an ongoing one that we should watch.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, Councillor Hancock.
Thank you. Can I ask a question about the temporary accommodation variation? Because obviously that won't come down next year in response to Councillor Rake's point about automatic stabilisers. I mean, it's more likely to go up, would be my understanding of housing in Devon. So I suppose quite catastrophically so, potentially. So I'm not quite sure what the question is, but I'm to what extent is it a risk from your perspective? Obviously, housing policy is not not your area, but financially, what are your concerns here?
Thank you for you, Chairman. So yes, we're very much monitoring temporary accommodation costs. I think in the last budget monitoring report that we took to the executive, we're seeing a similar sort of pattern that we had for 23-24. So at the moment, our additional expenditure is around about 300,000 more than the budget. We're not seeing a significant increase in expenditure at the moment. It's something we look at with the housing team on a monthly basis. So we're expecting that it may go up a little bit, but for example, we're not expecting it to go as high as, say, 500,000. When I speak to some of my counterparts in other districts, some of them are seeing costs over their budget in the region of £1 million. It is huge. Obviously, we look to take advantage of government initiatives. So we've just purchased some properties under the LAF3, the Local Authority Housing Fund. So we've gone from having 11 properties to having 18, I think it is. So obviously, every time we can purchase a house, that saves us about 30,000 on our temporary accommodation budget. So we will also look to attract other government funding. So it is a risk. It's not one that we see increasing exponentially like other councils are experiencing, but definitely one to keep a watching eye on. And it's something we look at monthly with the housing team to see that it's not going higher than what we were projecting. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Buckle. That's a helpful answer, but also one that clearly we need to keep monitoring. Okay, I mean, I sort of echo what's been said, and particularly Councillor Rake's point. The way I would see it is it's very, very good though, and we mentioned this last time, that the accounts show a net surplus. And it's very, very good that our investment income was so strong and higher than predicted is nice to see. But on the other side of the coin, as I mentioned last time, it is a little bit worrying that we did have overspend, and we did have quite a considerable increase in spending compared to the prior year. And I know that we've always got cost pressures, but I think it's up to this committee to keep monitoring those and to make sure that we have a balanced budget and a balanced outturn as best we can. So with that in mind, I just want to drill a little bit on the point that Councillor Rake mentioned, which is the reduction, or implied anyway, which is the reduction in estimated return on the investment income, because quite honestly, I'm not really sure I understand why midway through the year, we're forecasting a reduction in investment income when the interest rate, although it's declining, hasn't declined as much as was forecast it would decline a year or two ago when presumably when the budget was set. And maybe Ms. Buckle or Pauline, I could ask you to give your views on that, because I'm just unsure why it's happening.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I think this is about the budget monitoring position for 24-25. So against that £1.6 million budget, at the moment we're estimating the worst case scenario is that we could be down on that budget by about £380,000. Now that's linked to two things really. Part of that is bank base rates, which we are projecting will fall to about 3.5% by next summer. If we go back to sort of this time last year when we were looking at setting the budget, for example, around this time, we were expecting that we could get some 12-month investments up around 5.8, 5.9%. But actually what we found is that the fixed term deposits that we invest in, they're already factoring in those projected drops in bank base rates. So the rates that we're getting at the moment are more like 5.2. So we're not seeing those higher end investments that we would have hoped we would have got. Also, we are seeing that our cash levels are starting to decrease as well compared to forecasted. Now, part of that is quicker spending on the capital programme, so that's a good thing because it means we're delivering on the council's priorities. For example, some of the capital projects that we've got, like disabled facilities grants, we're already seeing, we're halfway through the year, but we're already seeing we're nearly fully committed on some of those grant schemes. There's high demand coming through, which means we're spending our money quicker. Not so much spread out over the financial year. We're obviously spending on the council plan as well as part of our delivery plans. And the point that was made about climate change earlier, obviously the council's spending £500,000 in this financial year on climate change, a further 100,000 being levered in through external funding as well. So I think it's probably, it is quite difficult to predict the base rates, but I think we may find that we get to the end of March and it's not as much as 380,000. But I think with the inflation data that's recently come out, I mean, we'll have to see what the market reaction is to the budget on the 30th of October. And I think it probably, Chair, when we get to the Treasury Management reports in December and March, we'll have a better idea about how far we are through and where we are going to land in terms of our outturn for Treasury Management. As I say, we are trying to do things to get some high rates and invest slightly longer term. So we're trying to do everything we can to mitigate that. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. That's a helpful answer on that. And assuring, yeah, Councillor Yardy.
So I have to go into annual governance statement 2023-24, principle, I think it must be C, which is about comprehensive stakeholder engagement. Now, I'm not contesting anything that's happened in the previous year, but I am identifying that, in my view, comprehensive stakeholder engagement is less than optimal at the moment. As we run into a budget, as we run into the sequence where we agree a budget, agree our accounts, I'm interested to understand how comprehensive stakeholder engagement is actually implemented. We usually have a 12-month run-in to a budget. We have a 12-month run-in to those assumptions that are being used in such a budget. It is difficult for me to understand how we compress a review of engagement with stakeholders into an example, parking, in 6 weeks. So that to me is less than optimal. And in the future, going forward, I'd like to see or understand that comprehensive stakeholder engagement is clearly identified and managed over a longer period than in sometimes a 6-week period before the budget is set.
Yeah, thanks. I think it's a valid point and it's been touched on before. Just to help us or to help the officers answer, are you meaning by stakeholders? Are you primarily meaning the external public, or are you meaning members such as this group and others? Both.
It's both. It's very definitely both.
Well, I'm not sure, Mrs. Buckle, if you were able to answer or whether we need to maybe bring that topic back. I don't know. Yep. To you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I think this was a topic that was on the executive agenda the week before last about car parking and differential charging. My understanding is there's a series of meetings with towns and parishes, which I think some happened last week, some are happening this week. Through that, there was a towns and parishes meeting as well that the chairs attend, where this was also discussed. Obviously, with car parking, there's a statutory consultation period as well. And I think there will be a report on car parking back to the executive in November, and again back to the executive in the January as well. So I think there are future reports coming forward, and consultation is progressing along those lines.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I noted that, and I think it's a good example of where there is stakeholder engagement. Councillor Yardy, is your point more general, though?
Yeah, I agree, and we're making progress over previous. We're making definite progress. My point is more general regarding the forward plan and the timing and engagement. As I understood it, that column that's on the right-hand side was empty when I saw it in July. It may have now been populated. Is it populated with anything meaningful? And do the parishes have enough time to receive the information, digest it, push it through their governance processes such that you can get a parish council approved approach? And the answer on parking is no, it isn't able to, although I recognise that there have been improvements. And my general point is about comprehensive stakeholder engagement on a broader level across the, I'm going to call it 20 initiatives.
Yeah, and I think this is a valid point for this committee in terms of overall governance. I mean, I think what's part of our role is to not only review the annual governance statement, but to satisfy ourselves that stakeholder engagement is working effectively in terms of the overall council's decision-making process. And what you're raising is a question of whether that's valid or not, true or not. I don't know whether Mrs. Buckle or anyone wants to answer it, like, you know, in the more general terms as been raised.
Yeah.
Or
I was just going to check with Mr. White whether there were any all-member briefings in the diary currently for car parking, because I wasn't sure, but
specifically on the car parking point, there isn't. On the back of the executive additional resolution for an all-member briefing, there is one in the diary on car parking specifically. Yes, there is.
Chairman, in terms of more general consultation on the budget, that is something that we again speak to towns and parishes about when they attend our meetings on a quarterly basis. We also consult on things like the council plan, so there was a very detailed consultation process on coming up with the delivery plans. We will be looking to do the delivery plans again for year 2 of the council plan. So that will consult on things like the amount of money that's put into corporate themes such as climate change, housing. So that's all part of the process. And in terms of the budget reports, that will go again to, there'll be meetings in January on that, and again in February. We don't do, some councils will do an all consultation on all aspects of the budget. We have tended to do that on the council plan individually, because that really sort of set out where the council was setting its priorities and putting additional funding into certain areas. Obviously, the budget reports are all public reports. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. What I'd like to do, if I may, because I know Councillor Yardy, you've got a strong view on this and one that I respect. I'd like to see if any other members have got any comments about, and in particular, whether you think this committee should be digging into this topic, not specifically car parking, but in general about the effectiveness of stakeholder consultation, the timing of announcements and who's involved in advance and who gets to comment. Are there any views from other members as to whether it's a concern that this committee should be looking at? Yeah, Councillor Rick.
Thanks, Chair. I absolutely share Councillor Yardy's concerns. I think it's one of the big challenges for us as a council, and this is replicated at all levels. Parish councils face the same challenges. I was at the Sustainable Southam Symposium on Friday, and this came up, which was parish and town council representatives, and this came up time and again. And I do think that in the general and broad sense that we need to do quite a lot of thinking and work on how we communicate and consult and engage with stakeholders, whether they be local parish and town councils, businesses, or individual residents, because I think it is an ongoing challenge, and it's one that, to use Mark's term, can't be rebutted. It's we're always going to need to do it, so I think that's very important.
Okay, thank you. Any others? Councillor,
I mean, not to add to what's already been said, but yeah, I would completely agree with Councillor Yardy's position here.
Okay, well, I mean that is fair then, I think, for us to consider what we do. I mean, I don't know if anyone, I think we've got a few choices. I mean, we could look at this in terms of overall governance process and make some recommendations as a committee, or we could set up a task and finish group, or we could ask for a member briefing. I'm open to ideas as to the best way, because I don't think we're looking specifically at car parking. I think what we're trying to address is the overall engagement with a broad group of stakeholders when it comes to council decision making and forward planning. I'm not quite sure if anyone's got a proposal or wants to bring a proposal to the next meeting. I'm open to that too. Yes.
I don't know if this would fall within the remit of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I think this would fall within their terms of reference, but I think. I don't know if Mr. White, if you think that's something that's part of the Overview and Scrutiny Committees.
Quite considerably. I'm also looking about the action at the peer review. Mrs. Buckle referred to the work around the communication strategies as well. So there's a piece of work which is an action directly at the peer review, and I was just trying to find it then.
Yeah.
There's a peer review action which is this. There are separate tentacles to this as well. There's certainly a direct action which came out of the peer review action plan.
Yeah, indeed, that's part of it. Yes, Councillor Yardy.
Well, I will specifically reference page 155 of the annual governance statement. This was the one that triggered me to make the point that I've just made. So it quite clearly sits in point 3 of recommendation there. But I'm not saying anything about last year. What I'm interested in is going forward, what we should do. So I understand it does fall under item, well, it would fall under next year's item 5.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Mr. Mitchell.
Yeah, Chair, just to inform members that within this year's internal audit plan, we are looking at community engagement and consultation. Okay, and just to identify, we're looking at 3 particular risk areas. First being no effective strategy, plans or approach to engage effectively with the public. So we'll be looking at that. That the council is effectively implementing and using online consultations, and there's good linkage with, you know, you're out on consultation on a number of things at the same time. Is there linkage between consultations? And thirdly, that we don't consult or engage effectively with the local community on specific areas, such as local plans, planning changes, etc. So that's part of the remit of that audit, which is actually taking place at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's helpful too. I mean, there's obviously a few different strands. Just to give my view on the way forward or a suggestion, my understanding is if we're looking at something historic, then that's on the table for the Audit and Governance Committee. If it's something that is more future orientated, it should be passed to overview and scrutiny. So if Councillor Yardy, you're really thinking about how to improve things in the future, then what we should be doing perhaps is making a recommendation to overview and scrutiny to draw together some of these strands and to consider whether they're complete and sufficient in, you know, in delivering the right level of engagement going forwards that we would expect, because there's the outcome of the peer review. There's other issues that are going on. I don't know if you'd be happy with that.
Can I ask, so the gentleman that just spoke, your role is internal audit. Yeah. I can see the words audit and governance in our working group, so I'm not quite following how that would go to overview and scrutiny. I do see that there was a very positive point that was made about the forward-looking programme. I would like to ensure that the stakeholder engagement is broader than just looking at planning issues. It looks at the forward plan. But I see audit and governance being in our remit.
In terms of guidance, Chair, the A&G committee and ONS both have the ability to set their own work plans, establish their own task and finish groups. This is clearly a cross-cutting theme, and now with the governance arrangement we have, whereby any member can substitute onto a ONS committee or an A&G committee, irrespective of political balance. If it's the wish of A&G today, on the back of the AGS annual governance statement, to establish a task and finish group, notwithstanding the fact there are, as again I'm looking at some of the peer review findings, there may well be some, as I'm speaking, Chair, I wonder if the forum may well be, of course, we do have the quarterly meetings of yourself as Chair of A&G, Councillor Hawkins as Chair of ONS, with the leader and the lead member of governance, in terms of making sure we're not duplicating work. If this goes as an action to that forum to see actually where it sits, but on the face of it, this committee has the ability to set its own work programme and set its own task and finish groups. It could, by hanging it on the AGS.
Okay, well, I think that's pretty clear then. It's up to us to decide, thank you, Darryl, whether we want to set up a task and finish group to address the question of governance and or the question of engagement around, you know, with reference to whether that's appropriate for the kind of governance that we want to have from this council. Councillor Dennis, were you wanting to speak? Yeah, are you sure? half a hand was up. Go for it.
Yeah, I'm pleased to hear that we could perhaps just set up a task and finish group within this committee, because I think Councillor Yard is correct, and it should fall under the audit, particularly as it's a principle B of our good governance statement. I mean, essentially, I'm not happy really with what's on that page 157. That doesn't seem to tick the box fully in my mind as ensuring openness and comprehensive stakeholder engagement. So I'd like to see that page much improved next year.
If you're not happy with the page, are you asking for an amendment, or you want to do some work to make sure it's more precise next year round? Sounds like the latter. Yeah.
Yes, it would be the latter. Obviously, this is recording what's already happened, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
okay. So what I'm hearing then is that we have the ability and the interest to investigate this, and probably as a task and finish group. Are people content with that? Is that what the view of this committee? I'm seeing some nods. Councillor Dennis.
Yeah, just to clarify. So if we set up a task and finish group, who within the council are we inviting to that? Who's kind of responsible for this? Just so
good question. Darryl, do we know who's responsible for?
In terms of officers or in terms of lead officer or member? Lead officer.
Both.
You'd be looking, I'd suggest, Mr. Hawke as lead officer. And again, I think in terms of the membership, again, the beauty of our current arrangements are we're not wedded to it solely being from the ANG membership. It could be ability for any member. So if there's a wish, for example, to pool in some members from ONS, but I mean, I'd suggest you wouldn't have executive members there. They'd be attending an advisory capacity with no voting rights. So you could pool in members, any non-exec member, be it so wish.
And I think in terms of lead member, I mean, the external communication or external communication is responsibility of the leader, and presumably governance as well, I would imagine. And the external community engagement is the responsibility of the deputy leader. So we could have both or one. Councillor Yardy. Councillor Yardy.
Thank you. Mr. White, you very generously, you just identified that there was a possibility of a meeting between Councillor Hawkins, Councillor Bonham, with the Chief Executive and other members. I didn't quite catch it all, but that would seem to me to be a very natural point to have this discussion. And should then that be deemed necessary, then we could create the working group to look at this. But I would start at the top, because the whole point about stakeholder engagement emanates from senior management. And if there's no buy-in there, the working group is going to struggle to be able to be effective.
Okay, well, I mean, let's take that as a recommendation then. So I think the recommendation is that I will, as part, so there's, just to explain the workings, there's a quarterly meeting of chairs and the leader and the chief executive. So myself, Jonathan, Julian, and Andy, and John Birch. And then as part of that, I will raise the proposal that we have a joint task and finish group to look at stakeholder engagement with an eye to effective governance, and to explore the idea of who wants to chair that, or who wants to, or what the makeup of that task and finish group will be. Would that be okay? Is that broadly what you're proposing, Councillor?
It is broadly what I'm proposing. It would be great on a personal basis if I could attend and possibly speak at such an event, but I'm not sure if I'm allowed. So that's that's
you may have to trust me. I don't. Sadly, on this occasion, I don't know.
Obviously, chair the task and finish group.
Yeah, you might be on the hook to chair the task and finish group. Okay, I don't know if we can capture that, but there's a recommendation basically for me to raise this and set up a task and finish group accordingly, which has got open membership, so that it includes other members, not just this committee. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's correct. I did also request that I was able to attend that particular agenda item, if possible, so that I could explain context from my experience working before I came to the council. Thank you.
Darryl will look at that. Okay, thank you for that. All right, thank you, Councillor Yardy. Any other points? Yes, Councillor Oram.
Thank you, Chairman. Just whilst we're on that topic, it might be worth recommending that any members who want to go on to such a task and finish group are taken from a pool of members who also have interest at parish or town council level. So we do have members who are parish councillors, town councillors. I know Councillor Nix is obviously a parish councillor as well. So those might be worth noting if you're going to put together such a task and finish group, because they're better placed for that kind of work.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. And it may be something that we should take. I don't know when the next meeting is of that committee. I don't have it in my diary, but of that group, it's not a committee. But maybe it's something we should expedite separately. Okay, thank you for that. Right, are there any other points on the accounts, or should we move to approve the accounts and all the paperwork? Can we go to the statement on glasses? Can we go to the recommendation? Okay, that we approve the wording of the letter of representation, the audited statement of accounts, the annual governance statement, and the summary accounts. Thank you for those as well. And to give delegated authority etc., regarding the pension fund letter, which has not yet been received, as detailed in paragraphs 4.2, 4.3 of the report. So basically, give delegated authority to sign off when the pension letter arrives.
So moved, Chair.
Oh, thank you. Good. Okay. Could I ask if there's a second then? Oh, Councillor Oram. Right, those in favour?
That's unanimous of the 5 recommendations.
Brilliant.
Chair.
Thank you very much, committee. Okay, just wondering, do we want to take a quick 5-minute break? Okay, let's do that if we may. Thank you very much, everybody. microphone. Thank you so much. Okay, good. Thank you. Welcome back. Let's go to the Treasury Management Quarter One report, page 207. And we've touched on some of this already. I'll ask Mrs. Buckle, if I can, to introduce the report and give us an update. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, so this report is the first quarter's report for this financial year. Members will be used to seeing the format of this report, but this is a new requirement to do a quarterly report on Treasury Management. This is the first time you would have seen a report for the first quarter of a financial year. Just to also give the leaders apologies, he's not able to be here today, but he would have presented this report. So in terms of the executive summary, the council slightly outperformed the industry benchmark by 0.09%, which is good news. So we achieved an average rate of return in this first quarter of 5.32% against the what's called the SONIA rate, the Sterling Overnight Interbank Average of 5.23. You can see going forward there on 4.1, that sets out our priorities, which we talked about before, about security, liquidity, and then yield. On page 210 of the agenda, it just gives a list of where we're currently investing the council's investments. So we had 15.6 million in money market funds. We had 17.3 million in fixed terms deposits. You can see the majority of that was with the debt management office. So that's basically investing with the Treasury, HM Treasury. We had 6.7 million with Lloyds and just over £500,000 with NatWest. And then on page 211, we've got the investment in CCLA, the property fund, and the Better World Cautious Fund as well. In terms of our borrowing position, that's set out on page 212. So the amount of principal still outstanding in terms of borrowing was just over 13.4 million at the end of June. There isn't any opportunity at the moment, so one thing we always keep an eye on is if there are any opportunities to reschedule any debt. That's something that our Treasury Management advisors keep us updated on. So if there were to be such opportunities, that's something we would bring forward to members. So just very pleased to say we have complied with all of our Treasury Management practices and our prudential indicators, and those are set out in Appendix A, Chairman. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ms. Buckle. That's very good. Just before we open up the discussion, could I ask if on page 213 we've got a typo, an error, where under 6.1 it said the budget for the budget for investment interest is expected to be exceeded. Is that incorrect? Because then it goes on to say what the shortfall is.
Yes, it is a shortfall.
Yeah.
Apologies.
Okay, thank you. Okay, are there any questions on this from members? I mean, we have seen this kind of report. Any questions, Councillor Rick?
Thank you, Chair. So we're sort of 9 basis points above the benchmark. Is that so that's across our across the entire portfolio. That's how we do it.
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
Thank you. So that's not kind of chump change. That's very good. So I just wanted to check on that, and also note that compared to the last time, I think we saw that little link group interest rate forecast thing, we seem to have reverted to a more normal yield curve, which is gratifying.
Sorry, what page should we be referring to?
I never know which page it is. Page 209 or page 211 in the MyGov thing.
Good. Were there any questions there, Councillor Rigg, or any additional?
Yes, there was a question and it's been answered.
Okay, thank you. Just to be clear. Councillor Dennis.
Thank you, and it's not to do with the content of the report necessarily. It's just that at the last meeting, I think I requested that we fill in that box regarding the climate change impact on the report. Was minuted last time, but it hasn't been done again really. It was minuted particularly that officers were in the process of developing a decision-making tool which looked at all the considerations and impacts of policy change. So one was just the comment that I would still like to see that box filled in. And second was, I wonder if there's any update on where we are with that decision-making tool, please.
Oh, yes, thank you. Okay, I don't know if anyone's able, Lisa, are you able to answer that?
Sorry, which decision-making tool was that, Councillor Dennis?
So it's in the minutes of the last meeting. We were talking about, keeping an eye out for sustainable and greener investments. We talked, but I think I asked, or someone asked about what the Better World Cautious Fund actually was. And then there was a request for authors of reports to fill in the boxes at the end of the report template. It was reported that the Climate Change Officer did review reports that had a potential carbon impact. Officers were in the process of developing a decision-making tool which looked at all the considerations and impacts of policy change. This is currently being reviewed and would form part of the report template in the future.
Can I help with that, Mrs. Buckle?
Yes.
Mr. Williams, as I understand it, developed a matrix which would take into account such matters. There's a meeting in the diary for myself, Mr. David Fairbairn as MO, and Drew Powell and Adam to look at it. The decision will then be actually, will we have two report templates running in effect, so that where relevant we'll use the template with the matrix developed by Mr. Williams and keep it very much standard as is now, or will we just try and adapt it into... But the short answer is, Councillor Dennis, there is a meeting, I think, in the next fortnight with officers to look at how that's going to be rolled out.
Are you okay with that, Councillor Dennis?
Yeah, that's great. Now I've just seen other councils. Even Cornwall Council have a matrix that they use, and what they generate out of that is quite interesting. So I'm pleased to hear that that's happening. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I have a question which is on the income from Treasury Management. Is the actual figure at this point in time anywhere in the report? Because I didn't notice it, but I may have missed it somewhere or other.
I think in 5.5 it says the council's budgeted in investment return, or our budget is 1.6 million, current forecast 1.22, and therefore we're expecting a shortfall of 380,000. That's in 5.5 of the report.
But I mean, would it not be helpful if we're going to see Treasury Management reports on a regular basis to know what the actual figure is for income recorded year to date? I don't know, that would be...
Oh, the actual income for the first 4 months?
That's my question. Is that something that we would want to see as a committee?
We can include that. The only caveat I'd say on that is it depends when you wouldn't necessarily look at that and be able to then project what the year-end position is, only because it depends when investments mature. So we would get that treasury management income at the point of a maturity. So, for example, you wouldn't have all your accruals in that; it would just be a figure on the ledger. But we can do that.
Yeah, I mean,
helpful.
I'm not suggesting we take away the the line that projects what the total investment return would be for the year. Yeah, Councillor Rake.
Sorry, just to pick up on Mrs. Buckle's last point. I mean, presumably there would be, even if an investment hasn't, if a fixed rate, fixed term investment hasn't matured, there are sort of notional accruals that are pretty much essentially guaranteed at any given point in time.
We wouldn't do those accruals on a monthly basis. No, we only do that as part of a year-end process.
Okay. Is the committee's view that it will be helpful to see the figure for the year to date? Any opinion?
I would say not, Chair, given Mrs. Buckle's comments, in that it would, because of the way that these things mature, it would give and if we're not able to have notional accruals, it would give a false picture at any given time, not a particularly useful one.
fair point. I mean, I bow to your judgment on that, and let's not bother if it's not going to be helpful.
I don't think so, but others may disagree.
Don't see any other strong views. Okay, let's not bother. All right. Any other comments on the Treasury Management report? One question I have is around the recommendation, Darryl. I really don't understand why the wording on our recommendation is quite different. We resolve to endorse the contents of the report. Why don't we just note it? I mean, I don't see what that really means, actually. Could someone explain?
Chairman, I think in the past members' wish was not just to note a report, but to be seen to be endorsing it. But we're in members' hands, we can change that wording if that's members' wish.
I mean, this is not a policy document or a statement of how we're going to do things, which I think would be sensible for us to endorse or not. This is more a statement of fact of what's happened in the past. So, you know, it seems surprising to me that we're being asked to endorse it. Again, I'm open to what the committee thinks.
Sorry, Chairman. I have a recollection that it was actually your suggestion that we, on a particular report, we don't simply note it, but more formally endorse it. But as the chairman, I suppose it really is your prerogative whether you want to note it or not.
I can also change my mind. With new information. Okay. The recommendation is that we endorse the contents, resolve to endorse the contents. It's a recommendation that we resolve to endorse the contents of the report. Anyone proposing that?
I move that we endorse the contents of this report.
I'm going to raise this again next year anyway. And next time.
Chairman, I shall second it.
All those in favour? Okay.
Unanimous. Thank you, Chair.
We like the wording. Apparently. Okay, thank you. Let's move on then. Item 8. Okay, so Dominic from Internal Audit will take us through the Devon Assurance Partnership Report, Internal Audit, Charter and Strategy. I don't know, Lisa, if you want to introduce this or whether we should go straight over to Dominic. Up to you.
Again, Chairman, the leader would normally introduce this. Just to say that this is Devon Assurance Partnerships Audit, Charter and Strategy for the current financial year. And happy to hand over to Dominic. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's this time of year when we have to present to you our latest version of our charter and strategy. It's a requirement of the public sector internal audit standards. Basically, the two documents ensure that there's an understanding of the role of internal audit, both and management's role within internal audit and your role in terms of internal audit. There's only a small number of amendments that have been made from the document that you saw, I think it was December last year. And these are set out in section 3.2 on page, I think it's 222 of your document. And just to elaborate on those, the first amendment, obviously back in the summer we changed our name from Devon Audit Partnership to Devon Assurance Partnership. So I've gone through the document and hopefully picked up every occasion where that changed it was necessary. Looking at the audit charter document, which is an appendix to my covering report, there's a slide 7, which is accountability. And in there it mentioned the old document, or the current document, mentioned about founding partners. And Devon Assurance Partnership was originally, it's 15 years old this year, and it was founded by Torbay, Plymouth and Devon. They were the founding partners. We've amended that to full partners because over the 15 years we have grown and we've obtained more partners such as North Devon, Torridge, Mid Devon, and Southampton, West Devon are not full partners, but are partners to the partnership. So we amended that phrase there. Another amendment was on the audit charter was on slide 12, relationship slide. It used to say that the head of Devon Assurance Partnership, attend committee meetings. Now, given the number of partners that we now have, it meant that he'd be going around the Devon countryside, going to a load of audit committee meetings. So we've just added suitable representative, and I hope you think that I am a suitable representative to represent the head of partnership. And the last adjustment was to the audit strategy, and towards the end, slide 19, about the resources and skills. It was just updating on staff numbers. We've grown a little bit. We've now got around 45 members of staff, and also the various qualifications, the numbers against the various qualifications have changed. Just for instance, that we had 7 people that were qualified under the Institute of Internal Auditors. We've now got 13 we've had a number that have passed their qualification in the last 12 months. We now have 3 IT qualified auditors, 2 risk auditors rather than just the one. And also we've got 1 more apprentice. So we now have 6 apprentices that are working through the organisation. So it just gives you a flavour of what's in there, but essentially the document is exactly the same as it was, apart from those amendments as to the one you saw last year. So I'm willing to take any questions on that.
Yeah, thanks very, very much. That's very helpful. We have seen this document before, and as noted, there are some changes, but they're fairly minor and shouldn't really affect the way the process works. But just wondering, are there any questions? Yes, Councillor Rake.
Not so much a question this time, Chair, but thank you, Dominic, for presenting this. And I just wanted to commend your work with apprentices and bringing those people up into the ranks of your employees. I think that's a laudable approach, and long may it last.
Just to point out on that, originally we took on, Devon County Council has what they call business administration apprentices that go around a number of the financial departments, and one of them is internal audit, and 2 of those apprentices have liked us so much that they've become internal auditors and have come off that scheme.
Very good to hear. Thank you. That's excellent. Maybe I could also give you a chance, Dominic, to mention why we haven't got an internal audit report, because I think we would normally expect one, but over to you, sir.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Yeah, in the original work plan, you were due to receive a progress report on the activity of the team. It was just, given the length of the agenda today, I thought I would just save you a bit of time by not presenting a report, but also given that the next audit committee is not that far ahead, so I thought that I would produce a report going to next committee on the progress of our work on the internal audit plan. So I hope that's okay with you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay. All right, so thank you. Unless there are any further questions, let's move to the recommendation that the committee approve the internal audit charter and strategy as set out in Appendix A.
Moved.
That was quick. Did you approve? I didn't hear what you said, actually. You moved. Oh, you moved. Yeah. You so moved. Okay, is there a seconder? Yeah. Yes, okay. All those in favour? Right.
That's unanimous.
Thank you very much. Thank you you're so quick, Councillor. Now. Okay, let's move to the next item then. Thank you. So again, Dominic, perhaps you could take us through the Audit and Governance Committee self-assessment and explain how this is going to work for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, SITFA has set out some guidance as to how it thinks or best practice for audit committees in local authorities. And as part of this guidance, it's recommended that audit committees review and assess themselves against this good practice. Devon Assurance Partnership, obviously, is, as I've said, I've got a number of partners and attend a number of audit committees, and it's our wish to actually carry out or guide members of this committee through a self-assessment exercise, which we're happy to facilitate. The outcome of the exercise will be reported, and where necessary, the findings will include an action plan to help you further develop yourselves so you become a better audit committee. Not saying that you're not already a good audit committee. The document, the guidance, unfortunately, it's a SIPFA document, which is copyrighted, so I can't share with you. But it's also felt that if you had seen the document ahead of the workshop that we're holding to, having to hold, that it might influence your answers. So it's a case of, it'll be a hour and a half type meeting. We'll get you together in the new year. I don't know whether we will come up with some dates. And yeah, we'll literally guide you through. There's a number of questions, and it's a kind of on a scoring scale of 1 to 4, 1 being not very good, 4 or the best audit committee in Devon. And we'll spend about 10 minutes on each question. So it will be a kind of consensus view as to what score you think. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Dominic. I mean, I hope the committee feel it's going to be a useful exercise. My view is that, we are a new committee. We're all new members, so our experience by virtue of that is pretty limited in doing this role. Councillor Dennis.
Just wondered if there's a prize if we are the best audit committee in Devon.
Absolutely. I'm sure Devon Audit Partnership under ethics and propriety, it says that the gifts have to be limited to £1.50, split between all 8 of us. Absolutely. So yes, I mean, because we're a new committee and less experience, I think it's a worthwhile exercise. And there are some dates, as you can see. Oh no, you can't see the dates. I beg your pardon. I'm the only one that can see the dates. So the dates suggested, because we did ask for this to be done in advance, are Thursday the 9th of January, Thursday the 23rd of January, and Thursday the 30th of January. And my feeling, or my suggestion is, because there's a council executive on the 23rd of January at 10 o'clock, that we might want to go for the afternoon of that day, the 23rd of January, sometime after 2, because then it allows people to come in here and to listen to the exec in the morning if they so wish, saves travel and so on, if people are available for that. I don't know if you want to check now or do that after, but that would be my proposal. Some nodding, some people don't have access to their calendars, but seems fine. Okay, so maybe provisionally we can go for Thursday, the 23rd of January at 2 o'clock for that. So this is a meeting just for audit and governance members.
And the invite will go to section 151 and also Drew.
Microphone.
The invite will also extend to Lisa as section 151, who is responsible for internal audit, and also Drew Powell as the assistant director.
Okay, that would make sense. All right. Well, thank you for that. So let's thanks, Dominic. So let's go to the recommendations. The Audit and Governance Committee note the report and the recommendation. We're going to meet to assess the committee's arrangements compared to the SIPFA criteria, and with the support of officers, draw up an action plan. So the officers in this case is you, really, Dominic. Is that correct?
Yeah, as I say, it will be myself, and neither the head or deputy head of partnership will come and facilitate.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Okay, those in favour? Okay.
That's carried. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much for that. Thank you, Dom. What?
I was saying we didn't have a chance for a so moved.
No, we didn't. We're speeding things up here. We're on an accelerated path. Got to get in quick, otherwise it doesn't happen. Okay, we've done item 10, so let's go on to item 11, the committee-sponsored task and finish group. And, well, it is the working group, the Freeport working group, with a verbal update of the meeting held on 10th of October. Councillor Nix, Chair, will provide a verbal update. Over to you. Press your microphone first.
Thank you. Okay, so working group met last week with the relevant officers and members of SLT and agreed the terms of reference. Unfortunately, we were interrupted by a fire alarm and so lost about 20 minutes of the meeting, which wasn't great. But Councillor Birch gave an update on the 17 points that the executive asked the group to look at. It was decided to look at the following topics in depth: infrastructure, financial resilience, and employment and skills were the three areas that were agreed at the meeting. Since the meeting, the topic has also been requested for further discussion on the displacement test, which I know a number of members were concerned about. So that will also be added to the sections of the group meetings going forward, and thank you for that, Councillor Yardy. So the next meeting is on the 28th of November, where we're going to discuss infrastructure. Councillor Birch and Mr Brooks are going to bring a document forward to that meeting, and we've invited Ian Cooper, who is included in the infrastructure from Devon around the Freeport. So yeah, that's a quick run through update.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Very good. Okay, any questions on this, Councillor?
Councillor Hopwood seems to have a question online.
Oh, yes, okay. All right. Oh, Councillor Hopwood, go for it first, because you look like you're
freezing.
Yes, needing to get indoors.
I'm in the wet, yeah, so apologies for that. And it's really raining. So my question is this task and finish group just for members of the Audit and Deputy, or could it be open to other members? Because Councillor Carter is very, very much on the periphery of the Freeport, being a ward member for Wembury and Brixham, and I just feel like she should be a member of that task and finish group.
Yes, Councillor Nix, please.
Okay, we have asked this question right up the line, and it was agreed that it was just audit and governance members. However, Councillor Carson did attend the meeting on Thursday and is very welcome to attend the meetings going forward, but will not be part of any discussion about outcomes because she's not on the audit and governance committee.
So I think if I understand the way, yeah, I mean, firstly, I think it's great that other members want to be part of the discussion, and we want to welcome that, and we want to encourage other members to be part of the discussion and to ask questions and to be part of the debate. There's no stopping any member attending or being part of it. The only thing that we are limiting in a way is writing the output. And again, we want a small group of people to write the document, the conclusions or the report, but that would be debated in a wider forum anyway, either in this committee or in the full council. So we're not trying to avoid anybody attend, listen, make representations or be part of the conversation or conclusions in any way. And, we've had this by email, so I just want to make it absolutely clear there's no blockage to anyone at all being part of the discussion, if that helps.
So, yeah, thank you, Chairman. So just moving on from that, does that mean then that all task and finish groups or working groups set up by Audit and Governance, does this set a precedent that no other members but those on Audit and Governance will be involved in those task and finish or working groups? Because if you're saying that for one of the task and finish groups or working groups, you need to carry that through all your task and finish groups and working groups. So does this set a precedent for other groups you set up?
Well, I can't. I need some advice, I think, to answer that. Councillor Oram, sorry, I didn't want to stop you speaking. Do you have a comment on this as well?
No, I just wanted to come in there, Chairman, because Councillor Carson his experience and views would be very valuable on the Task and Finish group. I think that she should be able to speak in said meetings. I don't know what the precedence is on voting rights or anything like that, but let's not forget that this council has adopted quite a flexible policy around members moving between different committees in order to make sure that all the committees are quorate. So why on this occasion can we not include Councillor Carson on a more formal basis?
Yeah, I mean, well, I don't think there's a reason why we didn't include someone who's not on the committee, except that when we asked for expressions of interest, we had more from this committee than we felt was reasonable. I think in general it makes sense to have a group, a Task and Finish, whatever you call it, with 4 people or whatever, and we've now got 5. We don't want to make it too difficult logistically. That's not to say that someone's views are not welcome. So over to you, Daryl, if you could.
In terms of setting a precedent, and like chairs, I see it every, be it working group review, be it Task and Finish group review, has its own adopted terms of reference. So those terms of reference will dictate who, and there's a committee resolution at the last meeting which actually in effect appoints 4 members of the working group, being Councillors Nix, Oram, Pressler and Hancock, and giving Councillor Yardy the opportunity to join because he wasn't at the meeting. But as you rightly say, Chair, there's absolutely no reason why any member of council, irrespective of what committee they serve on, which ward they represent, can come to any meeting of the working group or Task and Finish group and take part in the debate, any raise issues, questions, etc. The only difference is, of course, in this example, is that if it comes to matters of voting rights at the working group, only those members will have a vote. So that's the only difference.
Yeah, I think that's fairly clear. So the short answer is no, it doesn't set a precedent. We're open to do things in a flexible way. I think an inclusive way as much as we can. It was only that when we debated this, there was a lot of interest from Task and Finish members, and I think it's reasonable, based on officer guidance, to set a limit as to how many members there are, actually writing the set of recommendations at the end of it all. Otherwise, it becomes too cumbersome. But all other comments, questions, input, and suggestions are totally valid and welcome. I hope that answers the points raised, which has been raised before. Thank you.
Yeah, it does, Chairman. Thank you. I realise that she still has a say and everything else if she attends a group, but it's not quite the same as being on a group. And I understand that Councillor Nix also serves in the same ward of her, so we can keep her fully updated, but it's just not the same. And I think when there is something so pressing to your ward as the Freeport, being her ward and Councillor Nix ward being the closest to the Freeport, that I just feel they both should have been on it, and I'm disappointed that they're not. Just one of them is. Thank you, and I'll say no more. Thank you.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. Thank you, and again, thanks for the interest in this. And it is an important topic. It will keep going on. I'm sure it's not going to be ended, and maybe in due course over the coming years, the membership might change. So I think we're open to that idea too. Okay, any other questions or comments on the Freeport report from Councillor, or update from Councillor Nix? I just want to maybe ask about the timeline of any conclusions, because this is an ongoing working group, or whatever we're calling it, working group, I think. So will there be an interim feedback to us or to the full council? Because I can't honestly remember what we agreed on that respect.
So at the moment, there's no firm timeline. The only thing will be a report back to the executive from, as I understand it, the Mr. Brooks, who is the Director of Place and Community in Place. Is that his title? and then forwarding back, we will bring regular updates to audit and governance and through the executive to full council if and when necessary. But it's not seen to be an ongoing that will have a timeline. But as yet, that hasn't been agreed.
Okay, I mean, I think it might be helpful for the working group to just think about what its reporting timeline is. Or, you know, it's good to have a verbal update, but if there are issues, how do they get fed back? That would be very nice to know. Okay, so with that, I don't know if we have a motion on this. Do we, Darryl, on the working group?
In effect, Chair, it's just to note the update. Okay. As you'll see in the work plan item in a minute, we have now as a standing item working group and or task and group updates. So just in case, unless at that gateway point when a report comes with recommendations, we just suggest we're noting the update at this stage.
All right, thank you. So then, yes, thank you. So thanks very much, Councillor Nix and others who are on that working group. So let's go to the item 12. Oh, sorry, Councillor Dennis. Didn't see your hand, beg your pardon.
That's okay. Thank you. I've just wondered if there are any other live task and finish groups or working groups at the moment.
I don't believe there are. I think we had the task and finish group on St Anne's Chapel, which reported back and was commented on as part of the executive meeting, not the last one, the one before, when there was a debate about housing. Councillor Hancock, do you want to comment at all on that? I mean, I'll just give you the chance if you want to comment on that task and finish group, just to close it off. We have already heard a little bit, but is there anything else to say?
I think we've heard from it. I'm not sure where it's gone to in terms of the council. We've had no response from the executive. Councillor Hopwood obviously attended, but to express her views on it. But we haven't had any formal response from the executive or the lead member of housing, as far as I am aware.
Do we expect early response? Because I mean, in my mind, the response was, in a way, that the executive noted that there's a new housing officer which has superseded the model put forward in St Anne's Chapel, and that effectively means that there is no further feedback. Are you expecting anything more? Because
I don't know. I mean, I just point out that the executive asked us to complete a task and finish group, and then have not responded to our completion of said task and finish group. So I'm just merely noting that.
Yeah, well, we also got an email response from the leader saying that there'd be no further response. So
time well spent, I think, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rick.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the Yelm Valley Energy, was that a task and finish group?
Yes, that was a task and finish group which reported back verbally to this committee in the last meeting, which was minuted, and also reported back to the executive as part two, and we can now be open about that because the email was, or the response was sent to Young Community Energy in line with the verbal feedback that we heard in our audit and governance last meeting. So yes.
Just to note in that case, Chair, that as a follow-up to the verbal feedback from the last meeting, Mrs. Buckle, Mr. Powell were kind enough to take a meeting with myself and Councillor Mackay to discuss ways in which grants or funding decisions could be made potentially on a more flexible basis in future. It was constructive, but probably quite futile. Yeah, just to say, because that meeting was raised at the last, was the possibility of that meeting was discussed at the last meeting, and just to update that it did take place.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Ray. That is very true. We did ask for that consideration to be made so that we could think about future grants for future organisations, whether that will be possible. But basically, it sounds like that's not very likely in the current setup. That's my understanding.
I defer obviously to Mrs. Buckle. I think the question was one of whether or not we could take a more flexible / imaginative approach to grant funding. There are some possibilities in terms of writing hybrid grants that perhaps would incorporate repayment options, or that should the grant be to a sort of quasi-commercial undertaking, that we would say that if it works, we'll get some money back, that sort of thing, which might, I believe, but I would welcome any correction to my recollections that Mrs. Buckle might have.
No,
Yeah.
thank you, Councillor Rake. I think that's a very good summary, and that's what we discussed. The only other thing we talked about as well is the Council's UK SPF fund, and how we've got some, we're administering some grants through that as well to organisations, and we discussed, you know, how we're doing that process.
Yeah, thank
That
you.
is a
So,
government
I mean,
fund.
my understanding really is that we would need to use the grant allocation of some kind or other instead of an investment model, essentially. And if we get some return on a grant, then that's a bonus. And if we don't, then we have to accept that outcome. That's the way that we need to go in future, is my understanding based on the discussions and emails. That's correct, is it?
Yes, that's correct. I mean, obviously, we talked about the constraints of security, liquidity, and yield as part of our treasury management strategy.
Okay.
If I may, Chair.
Yes.
The alternative would be to carve out a section of our reserves that are currently invested, and say, you know, this is our casino money that we will invest in a looser way. But that would be a major policy shift, and whether or not the council would be willing to take it is a different question.
Okay, well, I mean, I think that's something for future discussion then, but that's, at least we understand the current position. Thanks for raising that, Councillor Rake. Okay, let's move then to the work plan. Unless there are other things, let's move to the work plan, item 12. The committee recommend the work plan. Can we see the work plan, Darryl, please, if we could? Although it's in the report, but perhaps it would be easier on the screen, because there's a number of things in there. So what we're seeing next time is Bishop Fleming annual audit report, which auditor's annual report, which we've already touched on. The update progress on the internal audit plan, which we've already touched on. Internal external audit tracker, which is new and we haven't really seen that before. Fraud risk assessment and annual fraud report. Treasury management mid-year, which is standard. Ombudsman annual review letter. Task and finish work group updates and committee work plan. Just on item 6, then, the Ombudsman's annual review letter. Mrs. Buckle, could you explain what that really is for us, please, so we know what we're going to expect?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I think we had one of these around about the same time last year. Basically, what it is, it's the council's complaints process. So we have a 2-stage complaint process: stage 1, stage 2. If the customer or resident is not happy with the council's response after the stage 2 response, it then goes to the local government ombudsman. So what that report does is a report from the ombudsman to say these are the complaints we've received. It will break that down between different service areas. So, for example, it will say X number of complaints, revenues and benefits service were received, some were received from the planning service or planning enforcement, and then it will give the ombudsman's view on whether any of those complaints were upheld. I think from last year I think there was one complaint upheld from the Ombudsman for the whole of the last financial year. So that will be a similar report, but just looking for the financial year just gone.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And just to add, I think what we would expect to see under task and finish working groups is stakeholder engagement, task and finish group establishment by that date, by December. So, you know, we would hopefully discuss membership in terms of reference.
And also, Chair, there's a couple of additional items which will come out of today's discussions, being the update from Mr. Powell on the merits of the climate change and biodiversity emergency being in the risk register, and the second one being Lindsay Linley's request with regard to the Civica financials update.
Yeah.
So those two have also come through today for 12th December.
Yeah, thank you. Those good points. All right, I don't want to go necessarily in detail on the March meeting. Things might change by then, but are there any comments or feedback on the work plan or any other suggestions about what we should include? We got enough to deal with? Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for that. And if there's no more business, give anyone a last chance. Yeah, Councillor Yardy.
It would be really useful to have dates in our calendars going beyond March. I am already booking, for instance, September, October, November, December next year, and I really would like to be able to not have to cancel the family holiday to make the next A&G meeting.
Yeah, very good point. I think we do have a draft calendar of meetings, don't we, for the next financial year?
We've adopted the calendar of meetings up until May of next year, the annual meeting. We are about to embark on working towards completing the process for 25-26, with a view, in reality, time that goes for the various internal stakeholders. December 5th council will probably be too quick, so in reality we can let members have drafts with the caveat that actually they're not necessarily approved and set in stone, but we'll be aiming, I think, for budget council in February to get the draft calendar there for adoption. But it's fair to say, myself, Mrs. Buckle and Mrs. Henstock look at dates, and I don't think they'll move much from where they are now. There may be famous last words, so be it the first Thursday in March is the 6th of March 2025, it could be the equivalent. So they won't be revolutionary different in terms of when their frequency and timing is, because we do work around the wishes of Mrs. Buckle and Mrs. Henstock and other dates.
Okay, fair enough. So we have dates until May.
Yes.
At the moment. Okay, so and we'll get the rest as a draft by.
In reality, because of course we have to dovetail up with our partner councils as well, I'd imagine, I wouldn't wish to set anyone else for it would be this. A draft will be there December, if not January. We can let you have a draft, but with the caveat again being that it's not actually approved as a final version.
All right, Councillor Dennis. Oh, different point. Oh, well, let's go back to Councillor Yardy.
I've already booked things for August, September. So if anything falls on those dates now, these dates are coming in afterwards and would cost a great deal for me to rearrange. So even if there was a provisional date and it was cancelled and then moved, I prefer that to having no dates, because at the moment I have to make.
Can I flip that somewhat? If Councillor Yardy lets me have his dates, we'll do all we can to work around those. Is that okay? Because I've had similar requests from other members.
Oh yes, yes. I think for audit and governance, we know that we're going to have a March meeting, a June or July meeting, an October meeting, and a December meeting. That's, you know, and they're all going to be on a Thursday, and they're not going to be the day of the council meeting, or one is on the day of the executive. But you know, try and avoid those months if possible. That's, I think, the track record of when the dates are for us. Obviously, we don't know about other meetings. But yeah, we all have the same issue.
Chairman, we can definitely avoid August and September. Yeah.
Good. Okay. Thank you. Councillor Dennis.
I'm just looking back at the minutes from the last meeting and about our request as a committee here that Overview and Scrutiny set up a task and finish group about the sustainable procurement policy and strategy. and we also requested that an officer attend the next ONS meeting. Just conscious that we've got the ONS meeting this afternoon, so just as a committee, I'm hoping that's
I think
happening.
that's a good catch, because I don't know if that's been actioned. Maybe it's a question for Daryl or for those that attend.
As I
ONS.
believe it, Chair, I think the Procurement Act has been kicked down the road somewhat, which has made this not quite such a pressing, time-limited matter. But nonetheless, I believe it is on the ONS agenda for a decision this afternoon in respect of do they agree to form a task and finish group to look at it, and then having done so, setting out who's actually going to serve on it. So yeah, I think that the pressing nature of it isn't quite as expedient as it once was, because I think the Act has been kicked down the road somewhat.
Councillor Dennis?
So is there an officer attending this afternoon?
Given that it'd be Mr. Hawke, and I don't think he's around, I don't think there will be Councillor Dennis, no.
Okay, I'm keen that we don't lose sight of the action, and if an officer's not attending, then perhaps we could drop a note to.
Absolutely, and of course, the thing is, we put an additional ONS in the diary for. There are a number of ONS meetings coming up this side of Christmas. I think there's another. I think 21st of November is an additional one, so we can push that request back to that 21st of November, because I think the overall focus this afternoon is, of course, South West Water, the South West Water agenda item. So, but we can certainly get an officer in for the additional meeting on the 21st of November.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Yardley.
It's not just a question of the legal act being kicked down the road. This council also did the climate and biodiversity declaration. So we have decided as a council that this is important. It shouldn't be driven by necessarily the date that this comes into an effect from a legal perspective. We have to act on the principles of that, possibly in advance of simple compliance with a date of law. That's the point I would like to make.
Yes, I think that is a good point, and that's why we raised it. It wasn't because of the legal, as far as I remember, it wasn't because of the legal deadline. Councillor Dennis.
No, I would like to be part of the task and finish group when it's set up. I'm really keen on it. So it would be, I don't know if there is an officer that can be made available this afternoon to pitch for it, but that would be great to get it up and running.
Mrs.
Chairman, both myself and Mr. Molyneux are attending this afternoon's meeting.
Okay, great.
In terms of procurement, the lead on that is Mr. Powell as Director of Governance, and Mr. Hawke that reports into Mr. Powell. So yes, I know both the director and lead officer for that are looking to set that up quite quickly and start working on that.
Okay, that's very, very good to hear. Thank you. I think that's, it sounds like we need to, or whoever's interested needs to make sure it gets raised and puts their name forward this afternoon, assuming that Overview Scrutiny can be as flexible as we are in its membership of task and finish group activities. Let's hope. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Anything else? All right, so let's declare the meeting closed, and we'll see you next time.